Hello and welcome back to Study History with Mr. P. This GCSE history topic summary looks at how William established his control over England after winning the Battle of Hastings. So it's important to understand first of all that winning the Battle of Hastings did not make William King of England. So after the battle, William waited to see if the Anglo-Saxon nobles would surrender to him, but none came. Instead, the remaining troops had fled back to London, and the Witan had actually crowned Edgar as king. William then took control of the south coast of England. This included Dover, where there was a castle full of soldiers. So William went here first for two reasons really. One, to show his power and his control, but also to make sure that if he did need to escape back to Normandy, that his route back to Normandy wouldn't be cut off or couldn't be cut off by soldiers. He then set about marching to London. On his way, William destroyed every town that he came across. This included razing much of Dover to the ground. Because of this, towns would then instantly surrender when he arrived rather than put up a fight. Now, William had then seized control of Winchester, meaning he had control of the royal treasury, or the king's piggy bank, so to speak. Edgar, on the other hand, had no money because of this. He couldn't pay his soldiers or his earls to help him. The Anglo-Saxons, for their part, had lost their best warriors at Hastings and were going to find it difficult to raise a strong army. Nonetheless, when William reached the outskirts of London, he was expecting a fight, and when he reached Berkhamsted, he was met by the leading men of London, as well as Edgar and the Earls Edwin and Morcar, and all of them submitted to William. After the submission of Edgar and the Earls, the Anglo-Saxons had no leaders then to fight against William, and the Witan therefore had no choice but to crown him king. But this is just the start of William establishing control. Establishing control was about keeping control as well. So William had to set about rewarding followers. First of all, he rewarded Anglo-Saxon loyalty. So Anglo-Saxons were allowed to have important roles in government so long as they promised to stay loyal to him. As well as keeping their land, or at least some of it, William also offered other rewards. For example, it said that Earl Edwin could marry his daughter, although he never fulfilled on this promise. William also had to reward his own followers. Certainly many of the people who had fought in the Battle of Hastings did so on the promise of rewards. So most of the rewards came in the form of land and money. And this land, in terms of rewards, came from the Anglo-Saxons who'd fought against William at the Battle of Hastings, and also from lands previously owned by the Godwin family and by Edward the Confessor. William also sent rich gifts to the Pope and to his church supporters, and it was his family and closest advisers that were rewarded the most. For example, his half-brother Odo received Kent, and the Isle of Wight, Hampshire and the West went to William Fitz-Osbern, and Essex and Sussex went to Robert of Montgomery. So as I've already said, also the land for these rewards came from those who fought against him at Hastings, and this, as I said, also included the land of the Godwinsons. Now, one key area of land that was absolutely crucial for William became known as the Borderlands, or Marcher Earldoms. Now, these were the areas of land on the border with Wales. Now, these new earldoms were more compact and smaller than the old Anglo-Saxon earldoms, and therefore the new earls had less power and were less powerful than the old Anglo-Saxon earls. But they were given special privileges and rights that were normally held by the king, such as establishing churches and creating towns and markets in the area. They were also granted the full power of the law. So, the sheriffs in the Marcher Earldoms worked for the Earl of each Marcher Earldom rather than the king, which gave these earls in turn more legal power. And unlike other earls, the Marcher earls did not have to pay tax to the king. Now, this helps William establish control because he gives some of his most trusted advisors these land, and in return they have a lot more perks and are therefore more likely to support William. They also had the right to build castles without asking the king's permission, and again this was vitally important in maintaining defence of the area. Castles themselves were another feature of William establishing control. So to start off with, a range of Motte and Bailey castles were built, and it's well worth your while familiarising yourself with those features. But they were built to help William establish control. Across the course of his reign, about 500 were built. And they were important because they were built in strategic locations. They were used as a base by the lord of the area from which to ride out and deal with potential rebellions, or skirmishes, but also to retreat to in times of defence. They were also used to dominate the territory around them that had been newly brought under Norman control, and their sheer size and the fact that the Anglo-Saxons were required to build them also provided this symbol of Norman power. So remember, these motte and bailey castles were essentially a large mound called a motte upon which the keep or castle was built, surrounded by a fence. There'd also be a courtyard or bailey area, again surrounded by a fence known as a bailey, and sometimes there'd be a drawbridge leading up to this castle. So these defensive features, including a ditch all the way around the outside of the world, gave the castle great protection, and because they were quick to build, or relatively quick to build as well, were essential to William establishing control over the Anglo-Saxons. In fact, at times of rebellion, William would go and build new castles on his way to deal with a rebellion just to show his power.